definitely glad that we at least have one of our mods in at really short notice. Amy Hall, Connie Lukens. Connie, will catch up with you later. Glory, is it Indelin? Not sure exactly how to say your name, but good to see you. Tim is also saying hi. So in this live stream, we're going to really just acknowledge what's just happened. The finding that Laurie Vallow has been found competent. But I also want to kind of just review the importance of this particular case. It really is an important case. It's stalled for a really long time while her competency has been sort of assessed and established. And then I also want to briefly go through, I think it's a 16-page affidavit, just some of the highlights from there, just to review and remember some of the most important parts. This is really for some of you who've either forgotten some of the certain aspects of the case, or some of you who are perhaps almost completely unfamiliar with it. And so, Doomsday Mom obviously refers to Laurie Vallow. It also refers to Chad Daybell. It refers to kind of a group of people who, quite a few individuals who died in mysterious circumstances associated with a sort of a cult scenario, or seems to have been associated with that. And so it's actually a really important story for kind of a variety of reasons, which I'm going to get into. Before I do want to just read the news. So basically, Laurie Vallow and Chad Daybell. Chad's actually her husband. They got married in Hawaii while all of this was sort of happening, while her kids sort of disappeared. So it's there's a kind of a focus on Laurie Vallow, but it's also a dude called Chad Daybell who wrote books on a certain kind of almost like a tangent to is it the Mormon faith, Church of Latter-day. Anyway, so he basically was in that particular faith and then sort of seemed to take it in a different direction. And he sort of established a following sort of his own, whether you want to call it a cult following or just kind of a group of believers, whatever you want to call it. And so they were going to be tried together, quite a serious case, a double homicide at least of two young kids, and then that got stalled by this whole thing of Laurie Vallow not apparently knowing what is going on in a courtroom, not being found competent, and then it's taken a year for that to change, for it to be found competent. Now, what's quite ironic with this case is quite a long time ago, I wish I could be more specific, but a long time ago, 2-3 years ago, when her husband, Charles, was still alive, I think at that stage they were actually divorced. He was concerned about her. He was not getting along with her, and he actually told the police, and it's on body cam, actually told them that she was not acting right, that she was basically kind of like this crazy lady, and he was sort of, kind of making these accusations. And you can kind of tell that the police, it's sort of like, well, you, the unhappy spouse, you, the, it's kind of a domestic spat. And so whatever he says, it's kind of, it's he's taking a position of, is it true? And then whatever she says, it's like, we can't tell what is the truth here within this couple scenario. And then, of course, Charles Vallow later died, appears to have been murdered. And then there's also the fact that when Laurie was accused of this, she was kind of assessed at that time. There's sort of this feeling, I don't know whether you want to call it a formal assessment, but the police at the time did sort of take Charles's, what's the word, allegations quite seriously. And there you had Laurie actually kind of defending her sanity, basically sort of laughing it off and saying, no, he's the crazy guy, and kind of pulling it off. She convinced them that she was completely normal and convinced them that that there's nothing here, nothing to see here, kind of thing. So it's kind of ironic that in the backstory to this case, there was Laurie herself in a situation where law enforcement were called to because of a scenario of, are you behaving in a crazy way? Are you what are these strange things you're saying? And we know, and this is quite an important part of this whole case, is what are their beliefs exactly? So in other words, what you do sort of start to come across is things like when someone, I don't know whether if they behave in a certain way or someone does a calculation, they are assessed to be a zombie, and so they are like not part of the chosen group of 144,000 that are going to be saved. That's part of that sort of doomsday psychology. But it is kind of like a scenario also of you sort of get this feeling of, if you're not with me, then you a zombie kind of thing. It's like, you know what I mean? If you don't support me, if you're not helping me get me where I want to go, then you're a zombie. There's a very quick way of turning a human being into a sort of a nothing and a nobody, a disposable entity, just by virtue of, it seems to be within a belief system, but it's also kind of quite convenient. Someone's not, including your own children, if they're not acting in a way that you feel is helping you to get to where you want to go, they suddenly become, it's a question, do they become disposable entities? Is that what happened here? And there is this strange psychology where, in terms of Chad's belief system, where you're rated on a sort of level. You are either some kind of deity level figure, or it's almost like there's a scale in the Marvel universe where a certain kind of superhero's got this level of power and another one is sort of down there. You kind of have the same thing, but within this mythic sort of belief system. So that is something I definitely want to talk about, is this sense of not just one person, but actually a group of people getting carried away with this sort of sub-reality, and then what the results are of that. And we might look at this and you might say, well, either it's funny, you say, woohoo, Laurie's not cuckoo, it's quite funny and whatever. There's another side to it that's not funny at all. It's pretty scary, because there's a parallel to this going on in our world right now, where there are large groups of people who believe in things passionately, strongly, and they think it's based on rational thought and reasonable thought, and it's actually just not true. And so one of the questions is, how does that happen? How does it happen that you get to a place like that? I just want to see who's in chat at the moment. Madeline Jimenez, good to see you. My Three Girls says, I'm so glad she couldn't fool anyone. P. Willie says, Laurie had a million reasons not to want to divorce Charles. She was very angry when she found out Charles changed the insurance beneficiary. That is a very interesting aspect. And it's also very interesting how money plays a role in this, in terms of the insurance from that Laurie expected to get after Charles died. And I think there's something similar to that when Chad's wife died. I'm not sure, I can't quite remember what it was for that, but certainly he would have had, I guess, full custody of his property. And I think that property is now being used to pay for his legal representation. Another thing that I think is worth remembering is there have been quite a few documentaries so far on this case. There was a moment where it was really gathering momentum and there was a lot of interest in it. And at one point, I think it was Chad's family. He's got quite a big family. He's got quite a few children. They were interviewed and they sort of like broke their silence. And they were sort of asked, what do you think happened here? And their perception, their answer was that that they had been framed, that someone had framed their dad or whatever. And it's the same kind of sort of, I think, very oversimplified derivative explanation that you have in the Stephen Avery case and sort of some other cases as well. Why would someone want to frame you kind of for what? Anyway, that is what they believe. And, in the Barry Morphew case, I think it's also what does he tell his family? Why is there a suspicion? Why, what is going on? No, well, I'm being framed. Oh, for what? Do I have an enemy? So, that is the explanation that they gave. So, Ema Anspach says Chad is also charged with insurance fraud. Sunflower says, hi, I'm here. Yeah, she says there are way too many people ending up dead around this case. Kitty Whitty says everyone said she was a good mother and a nice person. Was she just brainwashed? That's kind of an interesting question. Is Laurie actually innocent? Was she like everybody, like almost like everybody else, and Chad's the puppet master? Who is culpable in this story? Is Laurie the innocent victim here? And Chad manipulated her and he pulled all the strings and he psychologically sort of brainwashed her, or is it like they somehow got caught up in the same thing and they both brainwashed, or what? What is the actual story? So I just want to go to our poll. See, there are 72 votes already. I see almost 70% of you are saying the Doomsday Mom case should be the most high-profile case or trial in America. I definitely believe it. I think it has the ingredients for that. The scale of this case is incredible. High muffin top. The scope of this case is incredible. Also, the stuff that it addresses, to me, is really, really important. And I get the feeling that some Americans are uncomfortable with the subject matter because it touches on religion. And it touches on how religion can, to some extent, lead to, I don't know what you want to call it, unstable behavior, false things going on, I guess. I don't know if that's the way to put it. And it definitely is an uncomfortable territory. I think the Mormon Church themselves have, is it the Mormon Church that they've sort of divorced themselves from these people saying, they don't represent us, kind of thing. And so there is definitely this discomfort. But in a weird way, the Laurie Vallow case is this sort of little box of what can happen when a group of people get caught up. I often talk about a fairy tale that someone gets taken over, that becomes someone else's nightmare in true crime. So it might be Chris Watts, it might be, anyway, just in almost every single case. This is a little bit different, because it's not really a fairy tale in the typical sense of the word, like I want to have an affair with someone and I want to have a good life, or it's kind of not in that sort of generic thing of how you think you can have a better life. This is more of a fantastic and kind of crazy thing of, I'm actually a god. I'm actually kind of a god figure, and and as such, I can play God. I can decide who lives, who dies. I can wield this incredible power because I've lived so many lives, and I'm this. So in other words, it's now going way beyond the realm of fairy tale. It's now going into this sort of cult thing, but it's extremely disturbing because it's so unrealistic. And yet it's not just one person who literally thinks that this is reasonable. It's a whole group of people, that are caught up in the same crazy psychology. And so one of the questions is, how does that happen? And another question is, how do we make it unhappen? So if it's happened to this group, and it's happening to large parts of America and even the world, how do you undo that? How do you stop it? And where is it taking us? And I honestly believe one of the ways you can understand how people lose touch with reality is just by looking at social media. With social media, you have groupthink going on where you have people just repeating. If you have enough people repeating the same thing, it doesn't matter what it is, and it doesn't matter how absurd it is, that becomes their reality. And then if you have an algorithm, if you're able to assess that amount of people and that whatever their thinking is, maybe they think that crime is out of control for whatever reason. And let's say factually untrue crimes actually coming down, but they believe it isn't. Then a political figure can take that belief that's irrational, but perhaps reasonable, and weaponize it and use that for their own benefit. But what is happening is you're using someone's perception of reality. You even further distorting someone's perception of reality in order to benefit yourself. You might think that is quite harmless, but this is a story that shows that it's not, that it can be potentially extremely harmful, far more harmful than some other things that are going on. You might say, I believe whatever I believe. What's that doing to you? It is important. It is important to know that your beliefs are anchored at least in something that is reasonable and not harmful. Some of you in chat, you may know me. I've written many books on true crime, and I'd actually identified this as it was going to be a book that I was going to be writing. It was going to be called Cult Figure. It's going to be more about Laurie than Chad, but also about Chad. I'd already started researching it. I'd already started the beginnings of the book. And that is how long ago this case kind of has been stalled, because I haven't actually written a book now for around about a year at least. But this book was sort of on the edge of being written. It was at the point of being written when it sort of stalled, and now I have my doubts whether it will ever be written. It might be, we'll see. But it just gives you an idea that, for those who know me, I was bringing out books regularly, and it's been a really long time since I brought a book out. And one of the last books that I planned to bring out was on this case, not on the Barry Morphew case, not on the Summer Wells case, not on the Gabby Petito case, on this case. And then, as I say, the case stalled, and so I've kind of moved on. I'm not writing as much anymore. So, Hey Jealousy says the case sure reads as fiction. There's this saying that sometimes fact is stranger than fiction, and this is definitely an example of that. Definitely. So, just to sort of update you on the news where we are right now. Some of you may not be aware of it. Some of you may be. So the fact that Laurie's been found competent now means the legal machinery sort of kicks back in, and there's been this attempt to separate Laurie's case and her trial from Chad's, and that's been unsuccessful. And so what's going to happen now, so in a way, Laurie's competency has also delayed Chad from getting his case where it needs to go. I would really be fascinated to sort of know has Laurie wanted this to go on for so long? Has she kind of been wanting to be found incompetent, or has she just been found incompetent in spite of whatever she wants? I would just be really interested to know that. Like, was Laurie trying to influence that? We know Letitia Stork, I think, took wanted an insanity plea, and also there was the same thing with that. There you can see an incentive for that. I wonder what the situation is here. And then also you have Chad on the other side. He's married to Laurie, and he's paying his lawyer. And the longer the case goes on, the more it's going to cost him. How does he feel about the whole thing? Yeah. So anyway, according to KTVB.com, quote, Idaho law mandates that a defendant must be able to understand the charges against them. They've got to follow what's happening in court and assist their lawyers in their own defense. The GEM state does not have a so-called insanity defense. So that's quite unique, by which a defendant can be found not guilty of a crime due to their mental state at the time. So they go on to talk about Laurie being held in a secure facility for quite a long time. And, if you think about you in Laurie's shoes, do you want to stay in this facility? It's almost like being in a prison anyway. Do you want to stay in this facility? In other words, you want to be found incompetent, and then you're going to stay in this facility. But every month that you're incompetent, you continue to stay in the facility. And aren't you at some point going to think, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to be free. I want to show that I'm innocent. Well, if you are then found competent, then you go to trial, and things could go one way or the other. I just wonder, like all those thoughts that are going on. Anyway, so she received mental health treatment as it says, as officials work to restore her mental competency. I wonder what that really means. Like, what is mental health treatment? Is it drugs? Is it, do they read Nietzsche to you? Are there things like, what am I holding in my hands? Like, what are these tests to restore mental competency? And I guess it's also possible that just in a general sense, over a long period of time, Chad's influence over her, and perhaps also the impact of whatever mental malaise was sort of infecting her belief system. I mean, legitimately, where her beliefs were literally, whether you want to say infected, contaminated, changed, or whatever the word you want to use, that's got to be wearing off, because the source of that is no longer like sort of mainlining into your brain. You're now getting that interrupted by rational people who are around you. So I just wonder, like, on paper, exactly what it means to restore someone's mental competency. Are they given particular books to read? I don't know. They probably wouldn't give her books about Van Gogh to read, but I just wonder what that actually involves. Do they have her play chess? Do they decide what she can watch on television? How is someone's mental competency restored? How do you bring someone back to reality? Do you say, well, you must stay off social media? What is that? What does it actually come down to? Is it a drug thing, or is it conversations, or what is it? Do you do a number of sort of tests where certain questions are asked, and your sense of continuity in your own answers? That's not really the right word. Not continuity. Anyway, the way your thinking holds hands with itself. Anyway, so it says that On Monday, Judge Stephen Boyce ordered that Vallow be set for an arraignment, and that was after he'd heard word from the Department of Health and Welfare from Idaho, and he was told that Laurie Vallow is now mentally fit, and so the arraignment has been set for the 19th, which is essentially a week from now. And this is a really serious case. Laurie Vallow's husband is facing a possible death penalty, the death penalty, if prosecutors get their way. We don't know right now whether Laurie will be as well. I guess time will tell. We'll sort of see whether that happens. The actual statement from the judge is as follows. The actual statement that the judge made based on what was sent to him was the following. Based upon the court's determination that defendant Laurie Noreen Vallow, aka Laurie Noreen Vallow Daybell, is restored to competency and is fit to proceed, the court orders that the defendant be brought before this court to be arraigned. Further, the order staying the case is hereby lifted. In other words, the order that just sort of put the case in limbo, that is now being removed. Another thing that's quite interesting is I think at some point Laurie insisted on being called Laurie Daybell, and I'm not really sure whether that has happened. I prefer calling her Laurie Vallow, firstly to separate her from Chad, because I don't know, their marriage just seems kind of anyway. In my book about Laurie Vallow, I didn't really want to refer to her as Laurie Daybell, to intentionally separate her in a narrative sense from Chad, and also to associate her with her previous husband, Charles Vallow, and also to kind of associate her with her children. Is it JJ Vallow? In other words, to link her to other family members in the real way that she was linked to them, if that makes sense. So let's just look at some of your comments. Hazel I says, calling someone a zombie is kind of mental abuse. You're telling them they're not right in your observation. It's also a very quick way of dismissing someone. Someone may have quite a complicated dynamic with you, and you just reduce all those dynamics to nothing in a moment. And of course, you elevate yourself above them. If they're a zombie and you're able to make that judgment, then you are obviously not a zombie and you are exerting your power. Patricia Byrne says, do you think they are going to blame each other? That's a really great question. They haven't so far. That's a good question. I don't know really how to answer it. I think on the one hand, there seems to be a really strong bond between them. And if you argue that they've gone so far as to commit double and even more murders, so if you make that argument, you say someone has murdered on behalf of, or in terms of their love and their belief regarding someone else, I don't know if you're going to easily just change tune. Again, I think you've got to ask the question that I think you need to ask in all true crime cases, to gauge the sense of character and the personalities that you're dealing with. You've got to ask, is this a deep or a shallow person? And it's a very difficult question in this case, because although there's a superficial aspect to it, such as calling someone a zombie, there's also a very deep aspect to it, which is your spiritual beliefs that change you fundamentally. There's also a very deep aspect to it in the sense that Chad writes all of these books, and these books inspire and affect and change Laurie. And so I kind of get a sense that while some people in true crime are really shallow, that they are shallow, superficial criminals, there are some that aren't, that have some feelings of depth and however delusional they are, they nevertheless are strong and deep feelings. And so, to answer your question, I feel like the answer is no, but it kind of feels logical to assume that at some point, why wouldn't they, right? In the Amanda Knox case, you also kind of had a couple on trial, and there was a moment where the one seemed to turn on the other. And as soon as that happened, they both lost their alibis. But it was kind of like a temporary kind of bump in that story. Legally, it really makes sense to keep them both on the same page, right? If you want, in other words, if you're their legal counsel, it makes sense to have them both singing the same song, supporting one another, on the same page, whatever. And that makes the legal argument easier. If you're the prosecutor, you want to divide and conquer. You want them to turn on one another. That's going to make your job a lot easier. Whether that's going to happen, I would say no, just because it hasn't happened yet. But you never know. You never know what's going to happen. Just a reminder that bear in mind this case has yet to be tried in a court of law. There have yet to be jurors that must now decide, listen to the trial. So please don't sort of make absolute assertions of guilt, because that's not appropriate, and it can even be defamatory. So just bear that in mind. The case is yet to be tried in court. What we are looking at is the reasonableness of what some of the prosecutors might say, and also to some extent what possible defenses there are. We kind of want to examine the legal merits on either side while the case is sort of evolving, right? So just bear in mind, please don't make absolute statements of someone is guilty or whatever, because of the legal sensitivity that we're dealing with. And mods also be aware of that. P. Willie says, I assume Chad and Willie's portals are closed. Another thing that is really interesting with this case is that both of them were anticipating the end of the world. And I think the end of the world was supposed to happen. I could be wrong, into something like July 2020? I don't know exactly when it was supposed to be, but you could definitely almost get a sense that when the pandemic happened, there may have been a sense of, I can feel that the world is changing and that something is happening, right? I think that is actually true of quite a lot of people. A lot of people thought when the pandemic happened, this is the end of the world, okay? And then a few months go by and the world doesn't end. It doesn't certainly do very great. It's not thriving, but it's sort of limping along. A few months go by and those months turn into years and then years and years. And so it's almost like this thing of, I want the world to end because I want to, go to heaven and get my gold medal, I want to get Germany cricket to pin the little, hero badge on my chest. I can't wait for that to happen. Meanwhile, the world just doesn't end. I'm sure people are also thinking that perhaps with what's going on in Ukraine, is this the end? But life goes on even after the end of the world. But anyway, the interesting thing is Laurie, Vallow, and Chad thought that it was absolutely imminent and that their jobs were to sort of be almost like Moses guiding the Israelites out of the desert. They were going to guide the 144,000 to kind of like a giant campsite, I guess, in Rexburg. And Rex is another word in Latin for king. So it's like Kingsburg. So this is where the king is, this is where God is in the world. And so we're going to bring the 144,000 to this huge campsite, and Lord knows what would have happened after that. Campfires every day for a really, really, really long time. But that didn't happen. So one does have to wonder if, for whatever reason, law enforcement simply didn't notice Laurie and Chad, simply didn't act against them, simply didn't do anything. If you could sort of wave a magic wand and there was simply no response, what would actually have happened in the story if they'd had their way? Where would all of this have gone? And I think part of the answer to that is you would have needed money to pay for this concocted thing. And I think their money was restricted, but anyway, that's I guess a separate story. One does just wonder where this would have gone if they got exactly what they wanted, if they got their wish. Maybe the answer is, would more people have come into harm's way? Would more and more? It's difficult to answer. Muffin Top says, what's scary is within a culture, someone is always there to take over. Yeah, someone was saying that the answer in terms of Russia right now is, if you got rid of Putin, if you removed Putin somehow, there would be someone else in his place. That is definitely quite a scary thought. Patricia Burns says it was Laurie's duty to take care of her children, and instead she honeymooned in Hawaii. That's always the thing that is like almost the craziest part of all. Even so, there seems to be less opprobrium against Laurie Vallow than even for Nicole Kessinger. So yeah, you've got someone charged with killing her own children, essentially. I don't know if it's like directly, whether she was sort of an accessory or knew about it or whatever, but that's certainly part of the fabric of this case. And yet the vitriol that Nicole Kessinger has, there's nothing like that in this case, which is quite bizarre for me, definitely quite bizarre. And the reason for it may be that it's quite a complicated case. It's difficult to say this is the exterior of the crime tape. This is where the crime scene ends, just in terms of things like which state did this take place in, how many people actually were killed. Like, can you give me a number? How many people were actually murdered here? And who is actually responsible for all of those murders? Actually, not the simplest question to answer, because it's sort of, you can give a number, but then it's also like, but that also happened. And there's also that. I realized I made a big mistake. I didn't actually bring a glass of water here. So I may need to end this prematurely. I suppose I could go and get a glass of water, but still. I want to quickly take you guys through the affidavit. It's the probable cause affidavit, and it's really related to Chad Daybell. It's 26 pages long, and I'm not going to go through all of it. I'm just going to go through some of it, just to kind of reappraise you of what this is about. So I'm just sort of, so let's touch on some of the highlights here. On page 2, it says, since November 26, 2019, the Rexburg police, so where we are now, we are in 2022, and we kind of approaching 3 years in terms of this case. So it took 2 years for the Barry Morphew case to kind of get going. This case is now like at the almost at the 3-year mark, let's say 2.5 years. I always wonder whether there's intertextuality here. I sort of wonder whether, because the circumstances of Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow, the kids who disappeared, that predated Suzanne Morphew's disappearance. And I just sort of wonder, was somebody watching that and just like, wow, so someone can disappear and then nothing happens, no body, no crime. Did that case, the news of that case, the unresolved nature of that case, did that news reach someone else and give them ideas? It just makes me wonder. Anyway, so it says, November 26, 2019, the Rexburg Police Department has been involved in the search for J.J. Vallow, date of birth the 25th of May 2012, and Tylee Ryan, date of birth the 24th of September 2002. The minor children's mother, Lori Vallow, has been charged with 2 felony counts of desertion of a minor child, 1 misdemeanor count of resisting and obstructing, 1 misdemeanor count of solicitation to commit a crime, and 1 misdemeanor count of contempt. The contempt charge is for failing to comply with an order in a child protection action in Madison County. So quite a few charges against her, but the one that is explicitly missing here is murder. And so those charges only came much later. It says here, she was required to produce the children by January 30, 2020. So this is coming up to 2 years ago. Tylee was 17 at the time she went missing, and JJ was 7 when he went missing. Then it goes on to the next point. Chad Bell was present in Kauai, Hawaii on February 20th, 2020, when Lori Vallow was arrested on felony desertion charges. So actually both of them were kind of in Hawaii when it was like, where are your children? Like, while the police were searching for Lori's 2 kids, Lori was sort of somewhere else getting married. So she was like in paradise. The author of the probable cause document says, I was present at that arrest. He said Daybell was also present at the March 6th initial appearance in Madison County, Idaho. This case, I think, has also moved to a different county because of concerns over jury kind of contamination. Same thing as the Barry Morphew case. Chad Bell, anyway, says, as such, I know that Chad Bell was aware of felony charges directly related to the location, health, and well-being of the minor children named above. So what he's getting at here is, does Chad have an involvement in the disappearance of his brand new wife's kids, right? And it kind of feels like an inversion of the Chris Watts story, the story of he has 2 daughters, he's got a baby on the way, he wants to be in a serious affair with a co-worker, and then it's this idea of, in order for that to happen, we can't have other family members sort of spoiling that. We can't have children and we can't have a spouse. In order to have our happily ever after, we've got to put them into a nightmare where they disappear, right? This feels like another iteration of that. Like, it feels like this thing of Chad and Lori want their happily ever after, but there are these troublesome family ties that are not only interfering with their love affair, but also interfering with their sort of ascent as deities, right? Their God status, whatever you want to call it. I must say, I'm very interested to see to what extent the attorneys understand and account for the beliefs of these people, because that is going to divide the jury one way or the other. That's either going to antagonize the jury or it's going to you're going to get someone supporting you. But it's definitely going to be divisive. So do you avoid it altogether, or what do you do? It's definitely going to be a bit of a difficult thing to navigate in the courtroom. Number 6, since November 26, the Rexburg police, along with the FBI, have been investigating the location and whereabouts of these 2 minor children. The last verifiable sighting of Tylee Ryan was on September 8th, 2019, in Yellowstone National Park. A little bit of a intertextuality with the Gabby Petito case, where you have someone last seen in a national park scenario and then they disappear. The last verifiable sighting of J.J. Vallow was on September 22nd in his mother's apartment. So Tylee's last seen far from home in Yellowstone National Park. J.J.'s seen in his mother's apartment like about 2 weeks later. And his apartment was located at 565 Pioneer Road, Rexburg, Idaho. So at this point, Laurie's living near Chad, not with Chad, because Chad was still married, but near him. And then there's also the mentioning of Laurie's friend Melanie Gibb. While the Rexburg police and FBI have received many tips of alleged sightings, none of these tips have led to any verifiable or actionable information. So for a long time, they were searching for these kids. I think you could argue that it was 6, 7, 8 months that they were looking for Laurie's children. It was just like, well, where are they? Laurie Vallow moved to Rexburg on or about September 1st with her children Tylee and J.J. Vallow and her brother Alex Cox. Now, this is where the story starts getting more intriguing, disturbing, and more complicated. Alex Cox is sort of part of this family affair, and Alex Cox is someone else who's no longer alive in the story. So Laurie resided with her children at 565 Pioneer Road. Alex resided in the same complex, but he initially stayed in the same unit, but then he moved into his own one. Number 8, Laurie's close friend Melanie Gibb has cooperated with Idaho and Arizona law enforcement. Melanie Gibb has reported that from September 19 through the morning of September 23rd, she visited Laurie Vallow at her new residence in Rexburg. Melanie Gibb reports that when she arrived in Rexburg, Laurie told her that JJ had become a zombie. So Melanie gets there in September and is told JJ, her son, 7-year-old son, has become a zombie. Gibb further reports that the term zombie refers to an individual whose mortal spirit has left their body and their body is now the host of another spirit. The new spirit in a zombie is always considered a dark spirit. So in other words, when you become a zombie, you are now the enemy. You are spiritually kind of an opponent to whoever, is in that scenario. Thanks a lot for that. Hey, jealousy. Why couldn't Laurie and Chad be tried in just one trial? Well, they are. That is what is happening. So it says, while the dark spirit inhabits the host body, the person's true spirit goes into limbo and is stuck there until the host body is physically killed. So in this belief system, you're doing, I guess, the spirit of the person you used to love a favor by killing them, right? So they get taken over by a zombie, and so there's a dark spirit that is taken over a person, but the good soul of that person is kind of trapped somewhere, and the only way to release that good soul is to kill the physical person, and now you're going to release the soul. That's the psychology, right? So it's like, killing is good. Killing is doing somebody a favor. And of course, it's doing yourself a favor, I guess, as well, because it must suit some purpose, doesn't it? It's a question. Anyway, it goes on to say, as such, death of the physical body is seen as the mechanism by which the body's original spirit can be released from limbo. This belief was told to Gibb by Laurie Vallow. So the way I understand it, Melanie Gibb is educated on this belief system by Laurie Vallow. I don't know whether Melanie Gibb figures out this on her own, whether she shares that belief, whether she's come across this belief in Chad's writing, but certainly from the way that this probable cause affidavit's written, you get the sense that Laurie Vallow, I don't want to say came up with the idea, but has the idea and transfers it to Melanie. That's how Melanie finds out about it. That's certainly the spirit in which this is written. Laurie Vallow had learned it. Oh, there we go. Laurie Vallow had learned it from Chad Daybell and immediately told Gibb. So that is quite interesting. In a legal sense, you could say, in a legal sense, you've got to look at Laurie learning about the zombie psychology from Chad and then asking who ultimately is responsible for the psychology and for implementing the psychology, right? It's kind of a tricky, definitely kind of a tricky terrain. And so what does Melanie do? She's been told this craziness. What does she do? Does she wash her hands? Does she sort of try and set Laurie straight? Does she keep tabs of what's going on? What happens? So Melanie was present with Laurie and when Chad first taught this information over the phone in early 2019. That I think is a really important point. So it's not like Melanie had heard it for the first time here. She'd actually been present when it came up on the phone in early 2019. And this was in reference to Charles Vallow. So you kind of got to ask yourself, has Melanie not been thinking about this? Does Melanie believe this or doesn't she believe it? And now people are starting to disappear one by one. What does Melanie think about this? Or doesn't she think about it? Is this part of the plan? Is what's happening all part of the plan? And if you think about yourself as sort of a sidekick to this whole thing, and you're not a zombie. So someone else is a zombie, they disappear. Someone else is a zombie, they disappear. And you're part of this sort of group, but you are kind of part of the in crowd. You are part of the chosen. Then every successive person who disappears means, in a weird way, you're becoming more and more part of this group, in a way, if that makes sense. And so you might be thinking, wow, my time is about to come. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm part of this little inner circle that decides who stays, who goes. But it can also have this weird thing of, if I disagree, I may become a zombie, if you know what I'm saying. So it's got this sort of deadly safety clause in it that you dare not, rock the boat too much, kind of thing. Anyway, point number 9, Melanie Gibb has further informed me that Laurie Vallow called Tylee a zombie in the spring of 2019. So she called her daughter a zombie. Gibb was on the phone with Laurie and heard Laurie call Tylee a zombie, to which Tylee responded, "Not me, Mom." This arose out of Laurie requiring Tylee to babysit JJ, and Tylee did not want to. Simple thing like that. My daughter, can you please babysit my son? No, I don't want to. You're a zombie. With all those things that are associated with that. This arose out of Laurie requiring Tylee to babysit JJ. Tylee didn't want to. Laurie Vallow also told Gibb that Tylee had turned into a zombie when she was 12 or 13, which is approximately the same time Tylee had become difficult to deal with. Melanie Gibb has further informed me that she was told by Chad Daybell and Laurie Vallow that they held the religious belief that they were part of the Church of the Firstborn, and their mission in that church was to lead the 144,000 mentioned in the book of Revelation. They also stated their mission was to rid the world of zombies. On January 26, 2020, a search warrant was served on Chad Daybell and Laurie Vallow in Kauai, where they were living and on their vehicle. The children were not found with Chad and Laurie in Hawaii, and no evidence was found to suggest they were living with Chad and Laurie. So where are the children? Through this investigation, we have discovered that J.J. Vallow was registered at Kennedy Elementary School in Rexburg the first week of September 2019. Kennedy School was informed that J.J. had an individual education plan, or IEP, due to his autism. Kennedy Elementary was in the process of creating a new IEP for J.J. But on September 23rd, 2019, J.J. had an unexcused absence. On September 24th, 2020, Laurie Vallow called Vicky Barton of the Madison School District and informed her that JJ was going to Louisiana with his grandparents and wouldn't be home until the end of October and maybe later. On October 29th, Madison School District was informed that JJ would be homeschooled. Now, I think this is the area where, on the one hand, you might say, Chad is pulling all the strings, Laurie is being manipulated, Laurie is totally innocent here. She's the innocent victim. But when you see the way in which other parties are deceived, are quite cleverly manipulated themselves, and in this instance by Laurie, it's harder to get this idea that it's completely innocent, because you have Laurie explaining to Vicky Barton of the Madison School District this sort of reasonable scenario that her son is doing X, Y, and Z, and it's got nothing really to do, I'm talking about her explanation to Vicky, it's got nothing to do with her belief system. She doesn't say anything about zombies, she doesn't say anything about what she believes. It's more of a secular scenario that Vicky then accepts, right? Which seems to show that Laurie is aware of two realities: the reality that she chooses to have for herself and impose on others, and then the reality that she is aware that others can be satisfied with, I guess, if one can put it that way. That seems to be what's happening in this, certainly in this section of the probable cause thing. So anyway, so she gives her this scenario that JJ is going to Louisiana to be with his grandparents and won't be home until the end of October and maybe later. And of course, that doesn't happen. JJ doesn't go to Louisiana. He doesn't go to his grandparents. Instead, his grandparents are like, where is JJ? And they become an active part. They really become the heroes of the story. Their search for JJ. During searches of Laurie's apartment in Rexburg and subsequent searches of her apartment in Kauai, no evidence of homeschooling material was ever found. No other school district has ever requested JJ's records from the Madison School District, which isn't showing that to be in a particularly good light. Number 13, as mentioned, the last verifiable sighting of Tylee Ryan was in Yellowstone National Park on September 8, 2019. Photographs established she was there with her mother Laurie, her brother JJ, and her uncle Alex Cox. They drove there in Alex's silver Ford F-150. This trip was further established by tracking the GPS, cell tower connections, and Google account information on Alex Cox's phone. I think I'm going to skip through some of this information dealing with Yellowstone and dealing with the cell tower. It goes on quite a little bit. And we now move to point number 18. Alex Cox's phone was still at the Daybell residence. Hang on, let me go back to... So anyway, just to summarize, the narrative now jumps to Alex Cox's phone that seems to be moving around at all hours of the morning, like midnight, 44 minutes past midnight, 3:37 in the morning, 2:42 in the morning, and he's at Laurie's apartment, and he's also, I think, he seems to go to the Maverick on Main Street in Rexburg at 9:45, and so on and so on. So he's kind of got these movements around September 9, but like in the middle of the night. Point number 17, at 23 minutes to 5 in the morning, Alex goes back to his own apartment, unit 107, and he's there until 1 minute to 9 in the morning. About 22 minutes later, at 21 minutes past 9, he was located at a property. This is really important. So we're talking about September 9th, which is a Monday, at 9:21 in the morning, is at a property with address 202 North, 1900 East Rexburg, and that is the residence of Chad Daybell. So at the same time that Tylee goes missing, immediately after returning from Yellowstone, Laurie's brother is kind of running around at night, and also also like that Monday morning he goes to Chad's property. And then it says, it should be noted that while Chad Daybell's address is listed as Rexburg, it is actually located in Fremont. The 921 reading is a GPS data point and places him behind the home of Daybell's property near the east end of the barn. As we're going to see, these GPS locations are of critical importance. One of the things that's become really interesting in true crime, I've written about the old cases like, to some extent, old cases, Jodi Arias, Madeleine McCann, John Benet Ramsey, and some of those cases, like the internet barely exists. The John Benet Ramsey case, like email had just come online. Cell phones are like not even really part of that story. Like the phone records in the John Benet Ramsey case are like landline sort of phone records, and they're not really any kind of thing. I'm not saying there weren't calls, but that's something that is missing in the same way that the credit card records are missing in the John Benet Ramsey case. Anyway, but as you go through time, you find how metadata from like cell phone records, GPS, becomes more and more integral to solving cases, and it's almost like magic. As far as I'm concerned, cell phone records are the new DNA of true crime. And so we see how, especially in the Laurie Vallow case, where there was so little to go on, there was so little, it felt like nothing was going to happen for a long time. And you kind of have that in the Barry Morphew case as well. It felt like the police had nothing. And then suddenly this elaborate narrative almost is conjured into existence via making sense out of the metadata. Now, just remember, when you don't have the benefit of knowing what happened, the metadata is like very random. It's like lots and lots of messages, lots of GPS points. It's only when you start to really figure out what is going on, and certainly in hindsight, you can see, okay, that does make sense. But when you're dealing with just hundreds and hundreds of messages, it's difficult to tell which one means something, if that makes sense. So from the perspective of an investigator, it's kind of like a nightmare. It's like just too much data, too much information. But from the perspective of, someone who really pays attention to the case and has experience with it, it really is a gold mine of time-stamped, geographically relevant data and more than that. Anyway, so it goes on to say that Alex Cox's phone was still at the Daybell residence at 10:39, so he was there for like over an hour. At 10:47, his phone shows a hit at the city of St. Anthony. At this time, we are unable to tell if he was actually inside the city limits. Skipping a bit further, it says at 10:57 to 11:39, he's located at the Daybell property again. So one wonders what he went to get in in St. Anthony. At 11:52 to 12:02, he was at Del Taco in Rexburg. He appears to spend the rest of his day in his apartment. It goes on to talk about, throughout this investigation, the Rexburg cops have seized, searched, and analyzed multiple cellular devices pursuant to several search warrants. I'm going to skip a bit ahead. So this is just like brilliant police work, but it also shows how difficult it is finding the needle in the haystack that's going to theoretically change everything. So at the bottom of page 6 of this probable cause document, they highlight a text that some people would read and overlook, and maybe they did for a while, or you're going to read it and realize this is significant. Bear in mind, we're dealing with people who are highly symbolic in their thought processes. They think in a symbolic way. Calling someone a zombie is in a way symbolic that of whatever, right? But a lot of religious belief is symbolic. Good and evil, just all of those big concepts cover a lot of reality and other things. And so you kind of got to see it in that respect, the symbolic reality of what's being sketched. So anyway, Chad sends a SMS to Tammy at 11:53 a.m. on September 9th. So it says that the FBI found a text conversation between Tammy and her husband so the text was from September 9th, but they found it obviously much later. And this is the day after the last known sighting of Tylee Ryan. This was what the text read. Chad said, "Well, I've had an interesting morning, ! I felt I should burn all of the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. While I did so, I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He is now in our pet cemetery. Fun times! ! And I've got to say, the tone of that reminds me a bit of Jodi Arias when she left the staged voicemail message to Travis, who she knew was dead, and she kind of was like saying, "Oh, I got lost, fun, all that kind of thing." Chad writes here that he writes fun times. Just trying to see, I thought he said it twice. Okay, so he says, I had an interesting morning. He talks about burning something. He talks about getting a gun. And he said that did the trick. And he said one shot did the trick. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. And he also says that he buried something in a pet cemetery. He shot something, he burned something, he shot something, he burned something, and he buried something. I think he buried something, or he knew something was buried. And then he says, fun times. Chad then sends another message to her 3 minutes later, and he says, gonna shower now, and then go ride for a while at BYU. Love you. So I've always said you've got to pay attention to people doing the laundry, taking showers in the middle of a crime scene scenario, or what appears to be that. So now he's going to shower. Then quite a long time later, Tammy responds to him, like almost 3 hours later, 2:47 p.m., she responds, good for you. And then a minute after that, Chad says, I'm back home now. Number 21, this is quoting from the probable cause. I found the text suspicious because raccoons are normally nocturnal animals. That's somebody who knows animal behavior. It's quite important. We're going to have that hopefully in the Morphew case as well, knowing what the movements are of deer when the antlers come in, all that kind of thing. So you need to know animal behavior in a way to interrogate some of this. So he says, I found the text suspicious because raccoons are normally nocturnal animals and are not regularly out during the day. It should be noted that from interviewing neighbors of Chad Daybell, we are aware that in mid-July of 2019, Garth Daybell, Chad's son, told their neighbors that Chad had shot a raccoon out of a tree on their property during the day. So somebody else knows about this, apparently. Shooting of a raccoon. So there's a precedent to it. Chad had shot a raccoon previously, so I guess he's saying now he shot another one. Anyway, Garth told Matt Price about the raccoon in response to a question from Matt about hearing a gunshot. The Prices informed me that the fire pit in the back of the Daybell property was hardly ever used until the last few months. Regan informed me that there appeared to be frequent bonfires in the pit on the Daybell property over the last few months, and that the first one she noticed was soon after Tammy's death on October 19, 2019. So just to let some of you guys know who may not know this, besides Tylee dying and JJ dying, well, disappearing and dying, there's also Tammy Daybell, Chad's wife, who dies. There's also Alex Cox, who is Laurie's brother, who dies. And then there's also Charles Vallow, Laurie's ex-husband, who dies. That's already 5 people. And that's not the end of the list. On June 2nd, 2020, so this is jumping quite far ahead in time, but this is where the cell phone data and that particular message come into their own, why they're relevant. Detective Bruce Mattingly of the Fremont County Sheriff's Office contacted Samantha Williams, who is the sister of Tammy Daybell. He asked her if she was aware of a pet cemetery on Chad and Daybell's property in Idaho. She informed him that she was aware of the pet cemetery and stated that both she and Tammy were pet people and they both had pet cemeteries. When asked the location of the pet cemetery on the Daybell property, she stated that it was east of the Red Barn and near the fire pit. 2 days later, on June 4th, I spoke with Samantha and she informed me that she was aware of the location of the pet cemetery. Okay, let's jump a little bit ahead. The above facts establish that Alex Cox appeared to be at the Daybell property on September 9 until at least 11:39. Chad sent a text to Tammy about burning debris and shooting and burying the raccoon in the pet cemetery only 14 minutes later. So you're getting the feeling here that Alex and Chad are in the same area of the property within the context of this raccoon being shot and possibly buried. The pet cemetery referenced by Chad Daybell is located at the same location as most of the pings on Alex Cox's phone on September 9, 2019. I'm just wondering whether I should read this point about interviewing Melanie Gibb. And she's got a boyfriend, David Warwick. She talks about JJ became a zombie, JJ loved Satan, and an increased vocabulary as evidence that JJ was a zombie. This really just talks about JJ. Just really all sorts of things about being a zombie. I'm not going to go through this. I want to go to the search of the property. So number 31, the first site of interest was located on the north side of the pond near the north edge of the property. This site corresponded with the 2 GPS pings from Alex Cox's phone. So on September 23rd, a patch of ground was located that appeared to be disturbed. This was on June 9th. So this is like more than around about 9 months since these kids disappeared. 9 long months after their disappearance, there was now this search of the property, this section of the property. They talk about patches of ground that had disappeared. The weed growth on top of the disturbed ground was shorter than the surrounding weed growth. What appeared to be sod etching was also noticed. The disturbed area was approximately 4 feet by 2.5 feet. Members of the FBI ERT team removed the top layer of sod. Underneath the layer of sod were several large flat rocks. The rocks were removed and 2 pieces of flat paneling were found. The paneling was removed and investigators exposed a round object covered in black plastic. Okay, trigger warning, this is likely to be distressing. And this is from page 11 in the probable cause document. It's point number 33. Upon exposing the round object covered in black plastic, a strong odor was noticed. A FBI ERT member used a small sharp instrument and made a small incision in the plastic, and a layer of white plastic was observed. So it seems like there was a black plastic bag. Under the black plastic bag was a white plastic bag. An incision was made into a layer of plastic exposing what appeared to be human remains, the crown of a head covered in light brown hair. 34. The remaining dirt around this object was methodically removed, exposing what appeared to be a body wrapped in black plastic. The plastic appeared to be tightly wrapped around the body and secured with gray duct tape. Duct tape was also part of the fabric of the Casey Anthony case and John Benet Ramsey case. Number 35, Cheryl Anderson, Associate Professor of Anthropology at Boise State University, was present on scene and advised the remains found near the pond appeared to be human. So at this point, they don't know if it's JJ, they don't know exactly who it is. Number 36, a second site of interest was located behind a red unattached outbuilding located roughly in the center of the property, near a fire pit. Next to the fire pit is an area used as a pet cemetery. This site correlated to several GPS pings found on Alex Cox's phone on September 9, 2019. 37. Ground in this area was probed with a steel pole and several areas of disturbed ground were located. During a search of this ground, a buried cat and dog remains were found. A backhoe was used to dig further layers of dirt. Now, backhoe comes up in the sort of fabric of the Morphew case where Barry Morphew is interested in purchasing a backhoe. Anyway, it says a backhoe was used. So what is happening is a backhoe is used here to exhume, try and determine if there is a body here and then help in the exhuming of a body. So I think the question can also be asked, could it be used to bury a body kind of thing? So anyway, it says a backhoe was used to dig further layers of dirt. While doing this, bricks were located approximately a foot below the ground. So remember in the first discovery, they found large stones. Well, now they're finding bricks. 38. Once the bricks were discovered, the soil was examined and what appeared to be bones were located. Based on the condition of the bones, Cheryl Anderson was not able to determine whether the bones were human. 39. Methodically, the dirt in this area was searched and several other items of interest were found, including other bones, charred tissue, and charred bones. Cheryl Anderson indicated these additional bones, both charred and uncharred, and tissue found were human remains. So here is this horrible, grotesque, ghastly scenario where they've already found one human body, which is of a certain size, certain dimensions, and now they've found very little remaining of another body. They're finding fragments. They're finding the body badly altered, and whatever was done to this body by whomever, it seems like they decided they weren't going to do the same to the other body. So in other words, the large amount of destruction of human remains of the body found in the burn pit, so just partially burned partially charred tissue that was not repeated with the other body, right? What is not ascertained yet, it's not that this is certainly at this point, it's not definitely the bones or the fragments that are burned that were found second, that is entirely, that's not confirmed, that's not established. That's kind of a question. And then it's also not confirmed or established that the other remains are JJ, but the fact is 2 sets of human remains are found, and they found on Chad Daybell's property, and Alex Daybell was there at a certain time, and Laurie has been calling them zombies. So I think you can start feeling the problems the prosecution are dealing with, the fact that due to advanced decomposition, there are difficulties in identification. So you could argue, I don't know how these bodies got onto my property. I got nothing to do with it. We don't even know who they are. It could be anything. And then you have the other problem, which is, well, there are human remains, not only 1 set, but 2. And there are 2 children missing. Is it reasonable to assume X, Y, or Z, or is it not? Anyway, it goes on to say, investigators provided photos of some of the partial remains that were found at the pet cemetery to Sarah Getz. She was able to identify those remains as being non-adult human remains. So at least what was the progress, I guess, that was made here was that a forensic anthropologist said this is a human being, and it's not adult, right? And obviously Tylee was, I think, 17 years old. So there's something that is corresponding there at least, right? While officers were conducting their search, Chad Daybell was observed by officers to be continuously watching where officers were searching. He was observed watching officers while sitting in his vehicle in his front driveway and while sitting in his vehicle across the street at his daughter's residence. Now, on the one hand, you could say, jeepers, that is an absolute sign, Chad's guilty. But I would wager if the cops were searching your property, if the cops were digging your property, wouldn't you also be watching? You'd be like, what are you doing? So, you can also read it that way. Then it says, around the time the head mentioned in paragraphs 32 and 33 was discovered, Chad Daybell was observed leaving his daughter's residence in a grey SUV. That certainly is quite interesting. Then it says, I and other officers pursued him in police vehicles, conducted a traffic stop and detained him due to the fact that human remains were discovered on his property. So it seems like at a certain critical point in the search, Chad seems to make he seems to be trying to make a getaway. Or you could just say he went to buy a cup of coffee, but certainly that seems to be what's going on. Hey, Faticus, good to see you here. So that is the end of that. And then there's a probable cause affidavit for Laurie Vallow. Do you guys want me to read that? So I've just read the one for Chad Daybell. Do you want me to read the one for Laurie Vallow? Let me just have a look at some of your comments. So right now, 65% of you, or 2/3 of you, are saying that this should be the most high-profile case in America. It should be the most high-profile trial. Christine says yes. Zircon says yes. Fatica says yes. Patricia says yes, please. Angela says yes. The Humble Grower says, good night, everyone. See you all soon. I'll rewatch later. Marilyn says yes, please. I don't know if my voice is going to handle it. I didn't bring any water. I can feel it's getting a bit scratchy. If I do read it, I'm probably going to have to get up and come back, get up and get some water. Mama Bear says, absolutely. Mel Stiller, good to see you here as well. Okay, so I'm going to read it. I just want to, before I do, I just want to say something regarding this case being high profile. We are dealing with the problem of fake news. What is reality? Not only in America, but right through the rest of the world. And I believe it started with social media and social media being measured. So every time someone likes something, retweets something, comments on something, Google and all of these algorithms, all of these social media platforms are able to record the level of rationality of people versus irrationality. So, for example, they might find that a certain group of people are very, you could either say racist, or that they are opposed to this idea of immigrants taking their jobs, or whatever. But the stats may show that employment in that area is actually not so much a factor. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is irrational or even rational thinking, but especially irrational thinking, is something that someone else can use to their own benefit. And think about this case as a test tube example, where if you are susceptible to being irrational, then that might benefit someone else who needs you to be irrational. In other words, I can use you to get what I want. If you are a critical thinker, if your thinking is anchored in reality, I can't convince you to do something stupid or bizarre or crazy or illegal because you are too rational. But if I know you irrational, I can use that to my advantage. Now, social media can provide this data to certain people, and they do. But the Laurie Vallow case is a great example where you have this sick thinking, this zombie psychology that benefits some people, but directly at the expense of other people. But some people want to be part of that system because they move up the hierarchy, that they become gods while other people become food for worms, right? And it's very important to understand how something that seems good, right? So it's like part of Chad's belief and Laurie's belief, I'm sure, is that God is good, that we must tell the truth, that the truth will prevail, that the good will prevail, that we are on the side of good, and that you are doing something in the name of good. And do you get what I'm saying? And so it's almost like the end justifies the means. And so you have a scenario of because we believe this and we are good and blah, 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 blah. And can that lead to some horrible outcomes? That is what's being examined in this case. The other thing that I think is very, very difficult to navigate, as I say, is what the lawyers are going to say about what they were actually. Hi there, Loris, good to see you here. How the lawyers are going to try and assess the fictional reality. Bear in mind, this was real to these people in a way that's objective and not kind of insulting and not sarcastic and not demeaning. Basically, just this is the facts, this is what they believed. They believed in zombies, and this is it. In other words, you don't want to insult people who are believers of a separate system that is nevertheless, and these are good people and reasonable people, but you're kind of in a bit of a bind here because it is a situation where beliefs have led to a particular outcome. And so where is that going to take us? And so I think the whole conversation is of vital importance to us, to Americans, to other people as well, where you kind of ask the question, how does not just one person, but how does a sick psychology spread? And what is the reason why you can't just poke a hole through it? Why can't you just poke a hole through it like it's a balloon and it pops? Why does it? Hey, stop snoring. How does it perpetuate itself? And I think part of the answer to that is there's some kind of incentive. You become more powerful, and you can see how politicians would want to use be able to manipulate information that's going to benefit them. It also preys on basic things like fear and power and, I guess, narcissism. So it preys on primary fears like fear of insignificance, fear of death, fear of your own death, fear of being powerless or whatever. You've got to look at the kind of person Chad was and Laurie was at the time that all of this happened. There was a time where Chad was a gravedigger. There was a time where Chad was if not an unsuccessful author, a kind of a mediocre author. He certainly wasn't a roaring success. So he's kind of living this sort of wishy-washy life, but he wants this full-blown Technicolor spectacle in which he's the shining star of it, right? Laurie's been, how many times was she married? 5 times? And Laurie was on like a talk or a game show, and Laurie's this vivacious ex-beauty queen, and she sort of also had her time in the sun, and it feels like the sun is setting on her life and things feel like they are slipping. She's getting older. There's sort of a drudgery to being in debt and struggling financially. And this belief offers this amazing spiritual adventure. And why not sign up for it? I mean, it's like compared to my life, why not sign up for this? So there's an incentive to be part of something. And what's the catch? What's the cost? What's the cost to it? What's the reason not to subscribe to something where it's got such a good feel-good factor? And it's a little bit like just say no to drugs. In principle, it's easy, but when everything else is sort of falling flat around you, there's quite a strong temptation of, well, anything but this. Reality is actually too much for me, right? So anyway, I do think that this is a very important case that questions their reality, and through that asks us to question ours, if that makes sense. It's such an important case because there are so many other cases where you have one person who loses touch with reality, like Chris Watts, where one person seems to lose touch with reality, and we on the other side kind of go, how on earth did you think you were going to get away with this? And he obviously got delusional and he got caught up, and there's a certain amount of fantasy and whatever. But in this story, you've got quite a few people caught up in the same thing. Some of them are more caught up than others, and some of them are caught up and you kind of think you should have come forward. And then why didn't they? Why didn't those people come forward? Christine says, Afterlife is on Netflix. Watch it. Hey Jealousy says, it always starts with alcohol anyways. Patricia Burns says, if they hadn't been caught, who knows? Sunflower says, get your water. So far, I'm okay. Mel Stiller says, creating the zombie theory was their perfect excuse to get rid of people they don't want to have around. Now, I don't want to be mean. I don't want to be antagonistic. But the same way that what I want us to do, and it doesn't matter, I'm not saying be on my side or be on that side or whatever. I'm simply saying understand what happened here and think about it from your perspective, whatever your perspective is. So in the same way that they would say, for example, you're a zombie, so I'm doing you a favor by putting you out of your misery, and you're a zombie whether you are my own child or whoever. That same way of labeling someone and then they instantly become disposable, isn't that the same thing we do with calling someone an anti-vaxxer, or someone who isn't anti-vaxxer saying, well, you're a whatever, Fauci fan? Isn't that the same as where with, if you, in American politics, you support Trump or you're a Democrat or whatever it is. I'm just saying whatever it is, the same way that you reduce someone to basically a zombie in the same way, just through this label. I don't want to get into whether you are right or whether the other person is right. What I'm saying is that thing where you label someone something and then they're immediately dismissed. We want to learn to live with people we disagree with, even if what they believe is, according to our understanding, irrational, right? And vice versa. Someone else who believes absolutely that they are right, as also, we would like it if they could also tolerate us and learn to live with us, right? Because the alternative to that is Ukraine, is where you say, you aren't like me, so you're a Nazi, and so I have the right to like wipe out cities and wipe out people. So either we live together and we have our disagreements, or we call each other zombies and we have the right then to wipe one another out. Can we afford to be doing that in the 21st century? Can we afford to be doing that at all anyway? Can we afford to be doing it in our families? Can we afford to, someone who's, I'm a Christian, you're an atheist. If you're an atheist, I will have nothing to do with you. I'm an atheist, you're a Christian. If you're a Christian, I'm going to have nothing to do with you. It breeds intolerance. And that intolerance on a high enough level can lead to doomsday figures, can lead to this doomsday scenario. It's kind of where we say, my reality isn't compatible with yours, but that's okay to a point. I also think it's not enough to say your reality doesn't matter. You can go off into the sunset and believe whatever you want. I think we do need to say, we need to come to some kind of agreement on what reality is. You and I don't agree what reality is. Well, we need to come closer, because we could get into trouble if we don't know what's actually going on in our environment. If we don't know what reality is, one of us or both of us could get into serious trouble. And so it behoves us to figure out what is actually going on. So in a case like Laurie Vallow, that person who it's like, it's kind of your responsibility to figure out what's really going on here, is like Melanie Gibb's role in the story. It's like, I have certain beliefs. I don't know whether this has got anything to do with me. Actually, you need to pay attention to what's going on, because something serious could be going on and lives could be at risk or whatever. And you could play a role in stopping something from getting worse. You could be an important cog in the wheel of bringing things to justice, bringing a downward spiral to an end, or the opposite. You could be an important cog in allowing someone to get away with something. That's kind of how we are in this situation. We are kind of the Melanie Gibbs of our own lives. Maybe some of us are a different sort of character. What I'm trying to say is reality matters. No matter what your reality is, it also matters that you figure out someone else's reality. And to some extent, if it's your close friends and family, hold them accountable. I don't know if holding someone accountable is enough just to say, no, that's not rational. Maybe sometimes you've got to pick up the phone and call another family member, or call the authorities, or deal with it in a urgent way, like it's an emergency. I'm just saying all of these questions address the importance of this case. If it's not the most high-profile case in America, I wish it would become, because although there's, I think, some important themes in the Barry Morphy case, I think the themes in this case are far more urgent and touch into the zeitgeist, right? I want my fairy tale so much that I'm willing to be go like really, really irrational to get them. I'll do anything to get them. There's an interesting show on HBO, The White Lotus, where this one woman feels like, I don't want to play games. I want you to know just how crazy I am. And she tells this guy, and she expects him to turn and run. And instead he says, I still want to sleep with you. And I don't really care. I don't sweat the small stuff because I have a terminal illness. So as crazy as you are, it doesn't really even matter to me. What matters is that we find our way onto the same page, and we at least live a good life. Because at the end of the day, we're all gonna die. So no matter what your craziness is, it actually doesn't matter. We need to just get on with the business of not sweating the small stuff, and doing what we can do to make the most of our lives, kind of thing. Anne-Marie says, I think the point is that Melanie waited too long. Mama Bear says something. Mel Stiller says, is reality subjective? I think it invariably is. I think even if you're the most objective person, it is still reality related, relative to you and from your perspective. But you can nevertheless be more realistic about your reality. Okay, let's go back to the affidavit. It's page, what is it, page 2. I'm a detective with the Rexburg Police Department. I've been employed in law enforcement for more than 27 years. I'm currently the lieutenant over investigations for the Rexburg Police Department. So he's giving all of his credentials. On the afternoon of November 25th, 2019, the Rexburg Police Department was contacted by the Gilbert, Arizona Police Department about a missing child. For some reason, they refer to him as JV. I suppose it's JJ Vallow, but yeah, so JV is JJ. JV is a 7-year-old boy with autism who was supposed to be living with his adoptive mother, Laurie Noreen Vallow. So it shows you that at a certain point, Laurie was really a good person. I think good people adopt pets, adopt children. They certainly mean well when they do that. What I think is also interesting just to consider is this idea that the little boy with autism, if he is murdered, he's murdered second. He's not murdered first. So I suppose you could theoretically assume that if the child that was murdered first, if it is murder, was more problematic, was more zombified, was more evil, was more of a problem to the murderer, right? And so you could ask the question, is a teenager harder to deal with than in general than let's say a 7 or 8-year-old? Conversely, is a 8-year-old less work or more work with autism than a teenager? I think it's an interesting question. I'm not quite sure what the answer is. I guess it depends. If you've got kids those ages, what would you say? I just think it's an interesting question. It says Laurie Vallow also has a daughter, TR, that's obviously Tylee Ryan, as described. So this is obviously a blood relative, as described in this affidavit. Tylee is missing and has not been seen since September 8th, 2019. I'm aware that Laurie Vallow moved to Rexburg with JJ near the first week of September. I'm aware that JV, that's JJ Vallow, was enrolled for 3 weeks at Kennedy Elementary School. Not going to go through that. Number 6, we have not been able to find any witnesses who've seen JJ since September 24th, 2019. I was familiar with Laurie Vallow because the RPD had previously been contacted by Gilbert, Arizona and Chandler, Arizona police departments, who requested help to obtain search warrants for a vehicle in Laurie's possession. Said vehicle was related to a possible attempted murder of Laurie's niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreaux, in Arizona. I'm aware that Detective Ray Hermosillo had also performed intermittent surveillance on Laurie Vallow at the request of the Gilbert Police Department starting on November 1st, 2019. The detective reports that he never once saw JJ when he was performing surveillance during the month of November 2019. So we're not actually 100% sure when these children died. We're even not 100% sure if they are dead, but it appears that they disappeared, both of them in September, 2 weeks apart. And then nothing of them was ever seen again until about 8 or 9 months later. 8, the vehicle mentioned in paragraph 6 is a gray Jeep Wrangler bearing Texas license plate number LWD0997. Said vehicle is registered to Charles Vallow, who is the deceased husband of Laurie Vallow. Laurie Vallow and Charles Vallow were in the process of getting a divorce when Charles Vallow died. The Gilbert Police Department was interested in this vehicle because it had been identified in an attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux in Gilbert, Arizona in October 2nd, 2019. So in terms of the timeline, a lot of these deaths are happening at the same time. A lot of these strange disappearances and deaths are happening at the same time. Brandon had previously been married to Laurie Vallow's niece, Melanie Boudreaux. At the time of his attempted shooting, Brandon witnessed the Jeep, which he recognized as being the same vehicle that Tylee regularly drove. Brandon observed a rifle with a silencer come out of the rear window of the Jeep, and then Brandon's vehicle was shot once in the front driver's door frame. So the bullet actually embedded in the door frame, narrowly missing him. As Brandon drove home, the Jeep followed, but eventually turned a different direction. This same Jeep observed by Brandon was seized pursuant to a search warrant in November of 2019 in Rexburg, Idaho. It is significant that the vehicle Tylee reportedly regularly drove was still in Rexburg nearly 2 months after the last known sighting of Tylee. That is a good point. One wonders who was driving that Jeep. Number 9, I'm aware through contact with the Gilbert and Chandler police departments that Laurie's husband, Charles Vallow, was shot on July 11th, 2019 by Laurie's brother, Alex Cox. So this shooting happened 2 or 3 months before the children disappeared as well. And you can imagine that Charles would have wanted to know what is happening with his son, his kids, kids that he considered his children. Laurie Vallow is now married to Chad Daybell from Fremont County, Idaho. Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy Daybell, died in Fremont County, Idaho on October 19, 2019. I was informed that Chad and Laurie married approximately 2 weeks after the death of Tammy Daybell. Let me read that again. I was informed that Chad and Laurie married about 2 weeks after the death of Tammy Daybell, that's Chad's wife. I later confirmed they were married on November 5th, 2019, on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. Through our investigation, RPD discovered photographs of the wedding on a beach in Hawaii. Neither J.J. Vallow or Tylee Ryan are seen in any of those photographs. On November 26, 2019, Detective Hermosillo and Detective Hope went to Laurie's home located at 565 Pioneer Road, Rexburg, Idaho, to conduct a welfare check. Detectives Hermosillo and Hope met with Laurie's brother, Alex Cox. So they go to Laurie's home, and who's there but Alex Cox? And they also find Chad outside the residence. Chad acted as if he didn't know Laurie very well and stated he didn't know her phone number. Interesting, isn't it? Alex told the detectives that JJ was with his grandma, Kay Woodcock, in Louisiana, which was not likely to be true due to the fact that Kay was the individual who first called in a missing child report to the Gilbert Police Department. In other words, the cops are there because the grandparents have asked for the welfare check. When they do the welfare check, they're told that, well, the child is with the grandparents. Doesn't make sense. Hermosillo and Hope went to apartment number 107, but the apartment was completely empty and vacant. By this time, they called me and asked me to come to the premises to help search for J.J. Vallow. Shortly after calling me, the detective called me again and indicated that he saw Chad Daybell driving a black Chevrolet Equinox away from the residence. Detective Hermosillo stopped Chad and asked him again if he had seen JJ. Chad responded that the last time he had seen JJ was in apartment 107 in October. Now, we know that, let me just see. We know that it is more likely the last time JJ was seen was in September. So Chad seems to be extending the timeline there. He also admitted he knew Laurie Vallow's phone number, so now he's changed his story and he provided it to the detective. On the same day, myself and Detective Stubbs of the RPD located and spoke with Laurie Vallow in her apartment. We identified ourselves as RPD officers. And this is actually on body cam, and there you can actually see Laurie being very charming. She's quite attractive. You kind of get the sense that it's all one big misunderstanding and it's quite simple what is happening. It's much ado about nothing. And Laurie is quite sort of vivacious and convincing. She does seem to convince the officers. Laurie told us that JJ was in Gilbert, Arizona with a friend named Melanie Gibb. We obtained Melanie's phone number from Laurie. We ended our contact with Laurie and immediately attempted to call Melanie Gibb, but we were unable to contact her. Because Detective Stubbs and I were unable to contact Melanie Gibb, we immediately contacted Laurie again and we requested that she call Melanie Gibb. At this time, Laurie told us that Melanie and JJ were at the movie Frozen 2. So it was unlikely Melanie would answer the phone. So once again, you've got this very secular reasoning, this secular explanation, this very, very sort of rational, reasonable explanation for where JJ is, except it's not true. So anyway, we instructed Laurie to call Melanie Gibb and have her call us so we could verify the location of JJ. By the evening of November 26th, we had still not heard from Melanie Gibb. I'm just trying to see when this happened. So it was just the same day. So on the evening of that welfare check, Melanie Gibb had not contacted him, so RPD informed Detective Ryan Pillar of the Gilbert Police Department And so he then, I think, went to her home at 9:30 that night. Melanie was not home, but Detective Piller contacted her by phone, and she said that JJ was not staying at her Arizona house and had not been there for several months. Now there's a bit of a problem. And I think you can kind of go through the record. Did Laurie ask Melanie to cover for her to tell the cops that JJ is there even though he wasn't? Did she do that? On December 6th, 2019, RPD, now all of this is taking place in December. It would be another 6 long months before they eventually found something on Chad's property. On December 6, RPD was contacted by Melanie Gibb and informed that both Chad and Laurie called Melanie that day at separate times and asked her to tell the police that she had JJ, even though JJ was not with her. Melanie informed RPD that she declined Chad and Laurie's request. So they're kind of asking her, can you lie for us? Can you cover for us? And she's saying no. This further establishes that the statement made to law enforcement by Laurie Vallow was false and Laurie knew it was false. Number 16, the statement Laurie made to RPD about JJ being with Melanie delayed the investigation. Number 17, it talks about the next day, November 27th, RPD obtained search warrants to search Laurie Vallow's apartment at 565 Pioneer Road, Melanie Boudreau's apartment, that's Laurie's niece, at 565 Pioneer Road, Alex Cox's apartment at 565 Pioneer Road, and this particular apartment had nothing in it other than small items in its garage. All 3 apartments are part of the same complex. JJ was not located at any of the residences. It appeared to me that most of the clothing in Laurie's apartment had been removed. Other furniture was still inside the residence. RPD believed that she left Rexburg with Chad Bell the night of November 26. Melanie Boudreau later confirmed that Chad and Laurie did leave Rexburg the night of the 26th. During the search of Laurie's apartment, we found evidence that JJ was prescribed risperidone. Risperidone in the form of a pill bottle labeled with JJ's name and the prescribed risperidone. I've learned through research that risperidone is a tranquilizer prescribed to treat irritability caused by autism. That prescription was filled for JJ in January 2019 in Arizona. The risperidone bottle still contains 17 pills. We have verified through the Idaho State Pharmacy Board that said prescription has not been filled in Idaho. Quite an interesting detail. On November 27th, RPD also served a search warrant on Laurie Vallow's storage unit located at Self Storage Plus in Rexburg, Idaho. Inside of the storage unit, we found a blanket with pictures of JJ on it, a blanket with pictures of Tylee on it, a backpack with JJ's initials on it, toys that appeared appropriate for a young boy, winter clothing, other children's clothing, bike, scooter, and a photo album. RPD was further aware that the credit debit card Laurie provided for self-storage was declined on January 2nd, 2020. So you can see there seem to be some financial issues here. The owner of Self Storage Plus has reported to law enforcement that as a regular operating procedure, he has reached out to Laurie Vallow by phone, text, and email, but has not heard back from her. At this time, Laurie Vallow has not attempted to provide another debit credit card to Self Storage Plus. Soon after we executed the search warrants to find JJ at the apartments in Rexburg, Gilbert police asked us if we had any record of a Tylee being in Rexburg. Tylee is Laurie Vallow's biological daughter from her marriage to Joseph Ryan, who is also deceased. Tylee has a brother named Colby Ryan. I'm aware that Gilbert Police Department, can you see how this case is just sort of rippling outward further and further and further? I'm aware that Gilbert Police Department has been in contact with Colby. Well, I'm really feeling cold, so I'm gonna put on this beanie. I'm just feeling a little bit cold. It's definitely quite cold today. Colby reports that the last time he spoke with Tylee was on August 30th, 2019 via FaceTime. Right? August, and right at the end of August, and Tylee disappeared in early September. He informed Gilbert police that when he tried to contact Tylee after August 30th, Laurie would give excuses as to why Tylee could not talk with him. It feels a bit like Casey Anthony and Kaylee Anthony and Cindy trying to get hold of her. Through our investigation, RPD has informed that that Tylee moved to Rexburg with Laurie on or about the 1st or 2nd of 2019. We've been informed that Laurie told Melanie Gibb that Tylee was attending classes at BYU, Idaho. However, a records check at BYU indicates that Tylee was never enrolled at BYU or any other school affiliated with BYU. Now, you would think in a scenario like this that the logical place for a 7-year-old and a 17-year-old, if they weren't at home, would be at school. You know, it's like if you're not at, is this a feather? No, it's something else. If you're not at home, then you should be at school. And so now they're not at school either. Neither of them are at school. And they're not at school throughout September, October, November, and so on. RPD verified Laurie Vallow moved into the apartment on or around the 1st or 2nd. This was corroborated by Laurie Vallow's neighbors. They saw Tylee at or around the residence when she moved in with Laurie. These same neighbors actually helped Laurie Vallow move into her apartment. They saw Tylee briefly a couple of times after she moved in, but have not seen her since the first couple of weeks of September. Their son played with JJ multiple times. These same neighbors have further informed us through Detective Stubbs that one of their children went to Laurie's apartment sometime in late September to play with JJ, and the child was informed that JJ was not there and that he had gone to stay with his grandma. Another neighbor of Laurie Vallow lived directly across the courtyard from Laurie, had a doorbell camera that recorded JJ outside playing on September 17, 2019. I think this is some of the last footage of JJ. Throughout our investigation, we were able to determine through phone records that Tylee accompanied Laurie, Alex, and JJ on a day trip to Yellowstone on September 8th, 2019. We have obtained a photograph of Tylee at the park entrance through the National Park Service. Also through service of a search warrant, they found a photo from Laurie Vallow's iCloud account of Tylee in Yellowstone National Park that is time-stamped September 8th, 2019. This photo is the last time we can find any record of Tylee being with Laurie Vallow. We have found no witnesses who can verify they have seen Tylee since September 8th. RPD has verified that Chad Bell and Laurie flew from Los Angeles, California airport to Kauai on American Airlines on December 1st, 2019. This information was obtained through a search warrant served on American Airlines. RPD cannot find any information suggesting that they have returned to the mainland of the United States since that time, and it appears they have been in Hawaii since they arrived on December 1st, 2019. Those same records establish that JJ and Tylee were not with their mother, Laurie, when she flew to Kauai. So you kind of have a situation where Tylee and JJ disappear in September. Something happens in October, but anyway, a little bit later, Tammy Daybell also dies, and then shortly after that, Chad and Laurie go to Hawaii, get married, and just stay there. I'm aware that Chad and Laurie are currently living at 4141 Queen Emma Drive, Unit 3, Princeville, Kauai, Hawaii. I am in contact with the Kauai police who are monitoring the condo in which Chad and Laurie are staying. The children have not been sighted with Chad and Laurie. Further, I'm aware that on multiple occasions, Chad and Laurie checked into the Kauai beach resort and that no children checked in with them. That information was provided by an employee of the resort. Detective Chad Cataluna of the Kauai Police Department has performed surveillance on Chad and Laurie. He's informed us that he's seen Laurie with Chad at least 3 times since he was made aware that Chad and Laurie were residing on Kauai. He hasn't seen JJ or Tylee with Chad and Laurie. So 3 weeks go by. On December 20th, the Rexburg police and FBI published a press release announcing that JJ and Tylee were missing, that RPD was looking for them and asking for the public's help. Since December 20th, so this was really the point that the case started becoming quite mainstream in America, started becoming quite high profile. They say since December 20th, 2019, this case has received national media attention. Laurie Vallow has refused to provide, even so, despite all of that, despite it getting national attention, Laurie Vallow still refused to provide law enforcement with any information regarding the location of her children. And, they were ultimately never found alive, kind of thing. Through this investigation, RPD has learned that Laurie Vallow used the website www.care.com to find a babysitter for JJ. Through service of a search warrant on care.com, we were able to verify the identity of the babysitter who Laurie Vallow hired to watch JJ. We contacted this babysitter and she informed us that she watched JJ on the 19th of September. She had met Laurie and JJ the day before, September 18th. The babysitter understood that her employment was to be ongoing. The babysitter reports that on September 24th, she reached out to Laurie and Laurie told her that JJ had gone to stay with his grandma for several weeks and that the babysitter's services were no longer needed. Now, this is just my opinion, but I have a feeling that the trip to Yellowstone and the use of this babysitter on September 19th, this is just my own thinking, my own theory, that was done on purpose so in other words, the trip to Yellowstone was kind of like a way of waving a flag to say, if you're going to look for Tylee, well, yes, she is at Yellowstone. We were a happy family, happily together, happily doing our thing, happily holidaying. She's happy, nothing to see her, nothing suspicious. So in other words, we want, the issue is, was this a deliberate effort to create public relations, to create a photo op to say, yeah, Tylee is, and look how happy she looks. In other words, if this is a premeditated crime, was that part of the premeditation intended to mislead, right? That's in terms of Tylee. In terms of JJ, was the babysitter brought in to, at the very last moment, kind of say, well, we were looking after JJ on that day, there he was fine. In other words, have some kind of witness to the fact that we're caring for JJ and everything's fine, right? I'm just saying, do you think that that was random or do you think that that was calculated? I just think it's an interesting question. On January 16, a child protection action was filed by the state of Idaho in Madison County. The court ordered Laurie to provide JJ and Tylee within 5 days. Laurie Vallow was served that order on Saturday, January 25th in Hawaii by Detective Chad Cataluna of the Kauai Police Department. So despite all of this in the media, Laurie and Chad don't come home. They don't end their honeymoon. They're still on kind of this extended honeymoon like weeks and weeks later. Laurie did not produce the children within 5 days and has not produced the children to this date. I'm just skipping ahead here. On the dates between January 24 and January 29, I was in Hawaii with Detective Hermosillo and the Kauai Police Department. I reviewed video of Laurie being served with the order, which is filmed by the Kauai Police Department. JJ and Tylee were not seen in the video. While we were there, 2 FBI agents, Rory Johnson and Douglas McCland, assisted us in performing surveillance on Chad and Laurie. On the morning of January 26, they observed Chad and Laurie on a beach. JJ and Tylee were not with them. During the afternoon of January 26, I observed the Kauai Police Department serve search warrants on the persons of Chad and Laurie and on a black Ford Explorer they had rented. Said warrants were served on them in the parking lot of the Kauai Beach Resort. I think there's actually body cam footage of that encounter as well. JJ and Tylee were not with Laurie and Chad. The following items were located in their possession. This is quite interesting. This is definitely quite interesting. So they serve search warrants on them, on the persons of them, and they find the following. They find birth certificates for Tylee and JJ. They find Tylee's financial transaction card issued by BBVA. They find JJ's iPad, identified by his initials on the back. They find another iPad which was logged into JJ's Apple account. They find JJ's school registration receipts from Kennedy Elementary in Rexburg. Through our investigation, RPD learned that JJ's BBVA financial transaction card, which was found with Laurie Vallow, is still active and has been used since the last sighting of Tylee. A little bit of a Brian Laundrie, Gabby Petito scenario going on there. On January 26, a search warrant was served on the condominium located at 4141 Queen Emma Drive, Unit 3, Princeville, Kauai. I personally observed the Kauai police perform the search. In the garage of the condominium were 2 beach lawn chairs, 2 yoga fitness mats, 2 beach towels. There were no items in the garage that appeared to belong to a minor child. There was nothing found in the condominium that appeared to belong to Tylee or JJ. Further, there was nothing found in the condominium that would indicate that a 7-year-old boy had been there, such as children's clothing, toys, children's books, children's medication, etc. There was a second room other than the master bedroom in the condominium. That second room had no signs of being lived in or otherwise occupied. Through this investigation, RPD discovered that JJ had a service dog for his autism. This dog was named Bailey and was trained by Dog Training Elite in Arizona. On July 22nd, she sent Dog Training Elite Arizona an email asking about finding another family for Bailey due to a change in life circumstances. Dog Training Elite Arizona picked up the dog on August 30th, 2019. So again, one's got to ask, is this just something that is happening, or is this premeditation? Is there planning going on there? Is Laurie truly irrational? Is she truly being manipulated, or is she capable of acting, in self-interest in a rational way? Number 40 on page 10 of the probable cause. Through this investigation, I interviewed Chad Daybell's parents, Jack and Sheila Daybell, in Springville, Utah. They informed me that Chad and Laurie told them in November that Laurie Vallow was an empty nester. Through this investigation, RPD has interviewed Jason and Samantha Gwilliam. Samantha Gwilliam is the sister of the deceased Tammy Daybell. Jason and Samantha informed RPD that Chad told them that Laurie had no juvenile children. Let me say that again. Jason and Samantha Gwilliam is the sister of Tammy Daybell. She said that Chad told him that Laurie's got no juvenile children. Now, why would he say that? Bear in mind, earlier, Chad told the cops that the last time that he saw JJ was in October, when more than likely the last time that he was alive was sort of around about the sort of late September, September 19, somewhere around there. Throughout this investigation, RPD and the FBI have reviewed Lori Vallow's bank and financial information. No information has been found which would suggest that Lori Vallow is providing money to anyone to care for JJ or Tylee. It's quite a good point. RPD has found no evidence or verification of anyone providing for the food, housing, clothing, education, or medical care of JJ since September 24th, 2019. And Tylee since September 8th, 2019. As of the date of this affidavit, JJ and Tylee are still missing. And then it goes through kind of a list of things. Because Lori Vallow is the legal parent, because no one has verifiably heard from the kids, because Lori has verifiably been living in Kauai, and on and on and on and on. Because of all of these things, I believe probable cause exists that Lori Vallow has deserted Tylee and JJ. So that was what the initial charge was, that Lori has just been a bad mother. She's just abandoned her kids. And that was how it all started. Lori abandoned her kids and went and married this dude in Hawaii, and she didn't come back. And then it's like, well, the guy that she married, his wife recently died. Lori's ex-husband was recently killed. Lori's brother recently died, and then the children remain missing throughout all of this. And on and on. He goes on to say, every person who, having any child under the age of 18 years dependent on him for care, deserts such child in any manner with intent to abandon, blah, blah, blah. And so they're just saying, it looks like Lori intentionally and willfully abandoned her children. Then it also refers to Lori providing verifiably false information to RPD by saying that JJ was in Arizona with Melanie Gibb. Also that she obstructed the investigation as a result of that. Also that Lori solicited Melanie Gibb to corroborate the false information that Lori gave them. So that they're saying because of that, there's also probable cause that Lori resisted, delayed, and obstructed an investigation. Okay, I'm skipping a little bit ahead here. I believe Lori committed the crime of solicitation to commit a crime. Lori refused to obey a lawful order to produce JJ and Tylee. I think you could ask the question, if Lori knew where Tylee and JJ were, would she have told them? Also, did Lori know? Did Lori know where they were? I think that's quite an interesting question. Due to the following facts, I believe that Lori Vallow is a flight risk. Within the day of when we met with Lori Vallow on November 26 to ask the whereabouts of the children, Lori Vallow had left the state and was in Hawaii within a week. The charges being filed against Lori Vallow are serious, and so on and so on and so on. And so I'm not going to take it any further than that, but at this point in time, it was the 18th of February 2020. This was, 4 months before the discovery of human remains. They were issuing a warrant of arrest for felony counts of desertion and non-support, one misdemeanor count of resisting and obstructing officers, one misdemeanor count of criminal solicitation, one misdemeanor count of criminal contempt, and ultimately she was charged or accused of murder. And then we've gone through this whole thing of her being not competent. She's not competent to stand trial. I wonder what you guys think about that. Do you think she really wasn't competent? In any event, she now has been found officially competent, and the trial is now going to go ahead. So that is my story. I'm amazed that my voice has managed 2 hours, 20 minutes. I want to just look at the the poll here, 66%, so 2/3 think that this should be, 279 of you voted, so thanks for that. 2/3 of you think this should be the most high-profile case in America. I wonder, those who said no, I wonder which of you think what should be the most high-profile case? Should it be Barry Morphew? Or is it just boring kind of thing? John Hammer says, the world has gone a bit crazy. Emma says, I believe she was malingering. It's quite a cool word in true crime. Patricia Burns says, true crime rocket science invites us to let the facts in even when they don't conform to our preconceptions. Zircon says, thanks so much, Nick. Will trial be televised? I think at this point it looks like it may be, but it's definitely not guaranteed. What is definitely a good sign is thus far a lot of the legal issues have been kind of live streamed. So that's certainly a good start. So we'll see. Whereas in the Barry Morphew case, we haven't seen that. So the best predictor of the future in terms of that is what has already happened. Timmy, stop pushing against me. It's very rude. Hey, Jealousy says, this one ain't boring. Thanks for that. Status Quo says, excellent analysis and thanks. Samantha Mustard McDowell says, Loopy Laurie is dangerous. I must say, I do hope that this trial is televised. It will definitely be interesting. And it'll be interesting to look at Laurie and Chad interacting in court. Are they going to blow kisses to one another from the beginning to the end, or will there will something sour, and what will happen? Eclectic SB says, excellent analysis. Thanks. Pleasure for that. Okay, so I'm not going to take it further than that. Thanks a lot to you guys for tuning in. I thought of doing this as just a sort of short recap, but I think it did deserve a proper resuscitation so that we remember what this case is about. Remember that there's a lot of intrigue surrounding it. It's quite a complicated case, and legally the trial ought to be a very interesting theatre from that perspective. Great show, Nick. Thanks a lot for that. P. Willie says, current judge seems committed to streaming live for transparency. Let's hope so. Mel Stiller says, thank you, Nick, for providing a forum where we can discuss various theories. Your hard work is much appreciated. Terry Dean said, I couldn't possibly forget this one. Emma says, thanks for the recap. Is it Emma or is it Erna? Can't quite see. Erna. Timmy, can you go down? Okay, guys. Well, there's still over 190 of you in chat. What else is there to say? Just to sort of conclude here, I think one of the most powerful aspects of this case is the manner in which not just a single person has lost all sense of reality, but a group. And I think this speaks to the situation we all find ourselves in now, where we are in a situation where large groups feel like they don't know what's going on in terms of the world, that they've lost touch with reality. So this case kind of matters because, as I say, on a larger scale, this is happening all over the world. And so one of the things we want to ask through our analysis of this case is, how does it happen? How do you start losing touch with reality? And how can we get it to unhappen in the future? And the other thing I guess one can ask is Pandora already out of the box? Is it a done deal? Is it a fait accompli? Once you lose touch with reality, there's no happy ending, right? Or is there a way that you can come back to reality without catastrophe? What is the answer? So I guess we'll see. Hey, Jealousy says sometimes the law works. Nan Sullivan says good work. Okay, cool. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to make it to 2.5 hours. I badly need a glass of water. Some of you may not know, I'm actually sitting here with a broken rib. I don't really know what's going on with the rib because I have entire days that go by where I feel completely fine. And then last night I sort of didn't sleep that great, where it actually felt quite painful. Not pain as much as discomfort. And every now and then I'll cough in kind of a not an out of control cough, but a biggish cough, and then you feel that the rib is definitely tender. It's just not a good feeling. It's not, I feel like I'm a broken human being. I don't mean like my heart is broken, but I just sort of feel like my body there's a part of my body that's broken, and it's just not a nice feeling. It's definitely not a nice feeling. But I guess time heals all wounds, right? Let's hope so. Glory says my niece is waiting in a bed at the state hospital at Blackfoot. I was worried Laurie would be recruiting followers. Looks like she may get Laurie's bed. That's interesting. Samantha says, ouch, bone pain. You need to lie and rest as much as you can. Funny enough, being in a seated position is actually more comfortable than actually lying down. Sleuth and Sandal says, I cracked a rib with a sneeze. Awful painful. Terry says, is it fusing back together? I don't know, but it certainly isn't crunching and sort of flexing the way it did in the beginning. Takes time to heal. Definitely does take time to heal. Darla says, I enjoyed this true crime. Thank you, and enjoyed the chat as well. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you to Stephanie who was in earlier. Thanks to the members who were here. Also thanks for the super chat from a lot earlier. I hope you guys have a good night's sleep, and I hope you guys are have a rest of a good week. It's really cold where I am. It's been pretty wet as well, so trying to keep warm. I think I'm actually going to have a hot bath after this. Mel Stiller says, I sympathize with you. Currently, I'm dealing with 2 fractured ribs due to a very weak spine. Sorry to hear about that, Mel. That sounds worse than what I have. 2 fractured ribs. How long have you had fractured ribs? Christine says, sleep tight, everyone. John Hammer says, thank you, Nick, as always, such excellence. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.